Welcome to another episode of Lighting the Candle, A World That Works. I'm Bill Carell, and I have with me my two compatriots, Lisa Sheehan and Ken Caputo, who are incidentally a original cast from some 92 episodes ago. We get together and we record these conversations with a couple of things in mind, but mostly we start with you in mind. We're really doing something that we love to do, and that's to talk about empowerment. And then the other thing is to create empowerment and share it. So while we're having these conversations, I want you to send us your energy, your thoughts, your questions metaphysically, and we'll see if we can get them addressed for you right here live. So with that in mind, I really don't have a topic for today. And perhaps what we could do is we could kick off with maybe a definition for the word nothing. And an interesting conversation to have is, how does nothing show up in the world? And I don't mean it facetiously. I mean, if you were going to have a conversation with nothing and about nothing, where would you go to find information to have this conversation? So for instance, just to get things started, when I took on the practice of meditation 25, 30 years ago, the instruction was to think of nothing. So that was the very first thing to notice, what shows up in quest of nothing. And so I also went through some pretty rigorous training. Werner Erhard, and his whole philosophy was, there's only one way to create a possibility or transform, and that is to have a space or a clearing where that can now be brought into existence through language and speaking. So for instance, there's either nothing there to create in, or anything that you create on top of something else is a variation or a reference to that thing, either bigger, better, more, whatever, right? Faster, slower, whatever, all comparative to what's already there. So first of all, does anybody have a definition of nothing?
Seinfeld.
Perfect. What was that, 7 years of nothing?
That was the whole description of it. It was a show about nothing.
About nothing, yes. Interesting. So the thoughts that we have, those 80,000 thoughts or so, I like that number, so that's why I keep using it. But I will try not to say inconceivable more than once or twice today. The thought that if you have a definition of nothing, it has to use something to define nothing, yes?
Correct. Do you want to know the definition?
Yes.
Or the limited ones that they have here? Not anything, no single thing, having no prospect of progress or of no value, and not at all.
Yeah, I guess said differently, it's the absence of something. But to notice that it's nothing means you have to be comparing it to something.
Definitely.
Yeah. So again, it would show up first as a dichotomy. There's either something or there's nothing, like two sides of it. But what if the whole idea of nothing is the clearing away, the clearing away, the clearing away? It seems like nothing, but no, that's not it. When people think and they engage in practices for self-improvement, for example, the ideal has to come from some place and be placed into your thinking such that you can recreate that state as a state of mind who you are now that you will be in the future. Does that make sense?
I don't know.
Well, it kind of springboards off of the thought of, you can, anything you can what is it? Anything you can conceive, believe, you can achieve, right? Or variations on that theme. So you have to have a thought, that new, better question, more typically than an answer thought, to guide you on that path of structuring the mundane rigor of the daily practices to get you to that ultimate goal. And I wonder, thinking in terms of how that goes, I wonder if Tom Brady is sitting at home figuring out how he can have Super Bowl ring number 8 after all. So this kind of calls forth in this conversation that I am building, and I see the looks on both of your faces where you are taking it on board, or you're thinking, what is this idiot up to this week? No, I know. So you're taking it on board, and what would be a complementary stab at nothing and usefulness of nothing? And is nothing useful, or is it useless? After all, it's nothing, right?
I think, yeah, go ahead, Ken.
Oh, no, I guess it's just kind of interesting from, like, I think it's really the dynamic created between no thing and thing that actually creates the experience of, that we're having, or the perceptions of the experience we're having. So I remember, I was working with new teachers and talking about cadence and, and how to utilize their voice in a way that becomes engaging. And one of the things we talk about is the notes don't make the song, it's the space between the notes that make the song. So, and it's the dynamic of how you utilize the sound and the no sound and the rhythm and timing of that actually creates the value. So, and I think that just what's interesting is now you're just really talking about the view. In some art, in some Japanese art, the idea is to define the art through the space that's created, not through the things. So you're not looking at what's filling the space, you're looking at the filler as the thing that draws attention to the space. So they're both there, if we're playing like ones and zeros binary, here. But to me, it's like, it's neither one nor the other. I mean, one of the best words of advice I was given for meditation, because you have thoughts, there's all the racing thoughts, and it wasn't to think of nothing. It was just have the thoughts until you stop having thoughts. And the quicker you go through that process of just acknowledging the thoughts, over time, you have there's just a calming, and the lack of thought starts to appear. And then once in a while, they'll just kind of pop into your awareness like a bubble. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. And it just, all it does is remind you that you're in no thought or no mind, martial arts terms, as opposed to in thoughtfulness. So there you go. That's what I got.
Well, I like it. I like it. It implies a capacity, both in ability and in size. And so the interesting dynamic that goes on there is, if you were going to teach somebody how to not have a thought, then by making them have no thoughts first, the idea is to demonstrate the hopelessness of that practice. It's not possible. I know. I do an exercise with groups of people, business people, and I'd say, all right, I'm going to time the next 10 seconds, and I want you to have no thoughts during that 10-second period. Invariably, somebody will hold their hand up in the air and say, I did it. And I'm skeptical of people that do that, but there's always somebody in the group who says they did it. And at one point, this young lady looks over at the guy who said, I had no thoughts for 10 minutes. And she looked at him and she said, wow, you don't listen to anybody, do you? You don't even listen to yourself.
Oh, God.
I said, let's do it again. And this time he said, yeah, those thoughts. I get it. So the whole idea of being a human being racing through space, and I don't know, how fast are we flying on planet Earth? It's fast. And the fact of the matter is, to be able to, in a moment, transition from whatever thoughts you're having to thoughts you want to have is, again, almost like that Japanese painting you were describing, Ken. There have to be spaces in order for the other shapes to occur. Shape with no space is no shape.
Well, and I guess it's even like I think it's just a matter of attention and degree. So like we're all capable of having no thought, and no matter how microscopic, there's probably space between thoughts. So now it's just you're just talking about skillfulness at it or attention to it, but it's always there all the time. These things aren't separate from ourselves. It's just, I remember reading this book called Insight, and they were talking about the science behind like shower thoughts, and the fact that when you have an insight, you tend to have that insight well before you notice that you had the insight. So, and what's happening is, just the busyness of your day and all the stimuli is actually shielding you from what you know, but you already know it. So then you're in the shower and you relax. So, and you become open. So then up pops this insight like it's from out of nowhere, but it's not from out of nowhere. It was always there. So our ability to be thoughtless or thoughtful, we all have that capacity. We just are in different states of awareness and noticing of that. So, so it's just kind of an interesting thing. I wonder in a lot of the more Eastern based traditions that have been shared with me, it's not a either or, it's a dynamic interrelation of both and, whereas some of the more Western stuff, it's either I'm in a state of thoughtlessness or I'm in a state of racing thoughts or thoughtfulness, whatever it is, So, and that seems a little incomplete.
Sure. It almost seems like thoughts have a hierarchy, or they have some sort of a family tree. For example, to have a thought about this subject and then immediately have another thought about another subject and then back to a different subject and another subject, our minds don't typically work that way. Sometimes there's an incrementality to it, if you will. The thoughts are had or occur, and then a question gets raised about it in definition or understanding, or just to be able to fully appreciate the thought for what it is as an idea. And the thought transition from it being a thought to an idea is, I say that's a transformational occurrence, because all the thoughts that you have all day long that don't lead you to some sort of an implied action or some sort of a solution or some sort of a something that your brain is working on. I mean, our minds work so hard 24/7. And for the most time, it has nothing to do with anything other than hunger, temperature, fear, happiness. They're just like a jumble of all of these, kind of strings of thoughts, as opposed to the random popping of popcorn where none of it comes from the other. They just are in a vessel that all is happening at the same time or different times.